Believe it or not, I've actually been plotting this video since the beginning of this channel, and considering that for 4 years I've been playing with the concept that out of 66 characters that I chose the origami as my favourite, it was practically inevitable. I just had no idea I'd procrastinate for 3 whole years on this video topic. This is a long one, as you can tell, so I suggest you grab your favourite band of motor oil and your bowl of tree bark, and grab your gang of folded up paper, as we'll discuss everything there is to know about everyone's favourite, don't rebuke this, I know the truth, Foldy! We're actually going to start with a rather strange way of analysing a character, but I think it's one that will immediately hit the audience, as a bad character design, regardless of how well written a character can be, will create far more skepticism. The design of Foldy is absolutely genius, it is very much there as one of my favourite designs of the show, and it all lies with the principles of a great character design. For one, it's immediately recognisable as a silhouette. Obviously so, because there's no one else that's shaped like a pentagon, but the point still stands. Her design also uses shape language fluently. She's rather disproportionate, and that shows a lack of stability in her strength, both offensive and defensive. Helping is the fact that there's no conceivable way her having arms would work in any way. Think of any old armless character. Cake, Spongy, Enki, Rocky, tennis, golf, and basketball. With a bit of playing with scales and sometimes positioning, can pull off having arms quite well. Foldy, on the other hand, can't. She is built to be armless more than anyone else, and her wings make sure of it. This would naturally emphasise that she is fairly terrible at physical style challenges, on top of her thin exterior. However, it isn't all doom and gloom, as her being very flat means that she is very much aerodynamic, meaning that her relations with air can work to her advantage when she wants to, and has been shown in certain challenges that all reliable BFB 11 for example. In fact, her concept of an origami gives us a lot of material that ties to the character of Foldy, again, boosting a great character design. Origamis are commonly associated with gifts that you might give to a ceremony, or to a family, or even a friend. And as we see from Foldy's friendships to only a select few people, which we'll discuss some of them in the next part, this is very much prevalent to her. In addition, making origami is a peaceful pastime that someone may do, and can very much help with dealing with stress, alongside just general being a distraction for someone. This is in line with her general playful personality, her eager to help attitude in BFB, and her eventual tiresome view of the competition by the end, all of which will again go on further later. The final compliment I want to give is that I really like her colour scheme. Although there's an argument to be made that she's either cyan or turquoise. You're wrong! She's actually green! Okay, I kid. The shift doesn't get to her yet, but both colours do deliver on addressing her personality. Both colours, being cool colours, have this feeling of indifference and carelessness, which will be ample to her personality in TPOT 1 and 2. However, I find the saturation of these colours to be more interesting. The two colours both have a connotation of relaxation and tranquility, but Foldy is more of a desaturated version of either the two. This is very accurate to her in the show, and as although she can be loosely conceivably be considered a calm character, there are plenty of examples such as Lie and BFB 11 that contest this, and thus puts her in a more diluted, weak and tranquil. She isn't unrestful, and is generally quite calm, well, she isn't totally calm either. So in conclusion, 4D design is peak, and even if you don't like the character, you have to admit her design is very good, even just from an outside perspective, not delving deep into stuff like colour theory and shape language like as an arts class. We're now going to further in depth of Foldy as a character, beginning with her positive relations with the cast. This is also where we take a look at the episodes featuring Foldy for the first time. And speaking of which, the first time we see Foldy, well, officially anyway, is when she is quote-unquote helping Tennis Ball finding Leafy. Now granted, it doesn't hold any weight, but I'm mostly mentioning it because it seems like the two knew each other decently well. The way Tennis Ball knew her name when we've never seen him hang out with her, and the mannerisms she speaks in like she's her long mate. So assuming this, what was the relationship like? Though shockingly, I can't tell you for definite, I mean who would have guessed at the time, since Vesta couldn't tell whether the 4-line interaction and for Tennis Ball and Ford respectively, I can take a shot in the dark and say they were likely old acquaintances, simply because both characters, although having their own other friends, they both seem to stick to either one or two. For Tennis Ball, it's of course Golf Ball, and for Foldy, it's Stapy and to an extent Marker, and for those we will move on to next. Now before we can talk about the trio themselves, we first need to brush up on Stapy and his friendship with Foldy, and then we need to look to see how Marker fits in. Starting with Stapy, we see that his parallels with Foldy is that both are generally laid back and was not referred to goof off than to do proper work, see BFB1. However, he's also someone that gets stressed under pressure in some cases, like a BFB5, where when the free food player starts to tumble over, he responds by impulsively stapling the plane shut and pisses a bunch of staples into the ground. He also gets rarely vicious whenever Foldy gets hurt or killed, or even when he's prevented from seeing her, such as in BFB2, where him and Marco does full-on medieval torture on Olipop for the crime of not being Foldy, leaving out the overreaction part and everything. Shucking a fork at 4 when he killed Foldy, and threatening to beat up Clock in BFB 10 because he grasped and Stapy's elimination, and thus meaning that he will not get to see Foldy. When he is without Foldy, we soon rely more and more skeevy methods, and a far less serious approach to the game than he already did, which is why he would cheat in BFB 8. Whether he was leisurely around Foldy, he appeared to be far more cool and relaxed, so it's clear that the friendship is very much great on his end, but of hers? Similar stuff, I suppose. But less aggressive enough to not execute someone, but granted Stapy never got the chance to be killed. We get to BFB 11, I promise we'll get over to good context, but after a racer showed the footage of Mash grassing on Stapy for cheating, she was not a happy camper to say the least. Now on the surface, that would make Foldy a rather irrational person, and on some levels, she most certainly is. However, if you found out your friend got eliminated due to someone else, without leaving so much as a farewell, in fact you were full-blown dead, I think you and I would probably want to smother that person with a pillow at night. Adding on to this, Horace never seems to explain the context well, like what did Stapy do for Mash to grass at him? He just showed her the footage of Mash showing Donut, and the footage is never shown properly. Meaning that for Stapy to us, it's because he's an ugly little cheating cop, but to Foldy it looks like a sabotage that Mash has concocted to get free food up for elimination, and therefore Stapy went bye-bye and she hates Mash. This isn't to say that they're so similar. Foldy can be more exemplified to a Genser, at least physically, and a more caring character, which can conflict with the more abrasive Stapy. This is most evidenced in BFB4, where the two had a conflicting views to Marker not knowing how to play rock, paper, scissors.
Play?
Not yet.
That's lame. Stapy!
So to summarise, Stapy and Foldy had a very strong bond, with a friendly sense to each other, but also in a defensive sense, whether someone does something to either of them, if one happens to another, then the other would go over the top in vengeance. Now onto Marker, and before I can go on to him, there is a discussion whether the two are actually friends with him to begin with, and although I disagree with it, judging by the lack of activity between the two post Stapy, I can see why, and I can certainly talk about more in depth. For now though, Marker is a character who feels like the centre of the spectrum of the trio. He has the playful and friendly attitude of both, but also incorporates attributes from each character. He seems to have the semi-abrasiveness of Stapy, whilst also having the more caring side of Foldy. Whilst in theory, and sometimes in practice, this makes an incredibly strong bond with the two, it does have its drawbacks. Unlike Foldy and Stapy, where they seem to have polar opposites in some areas that bounce off each other, Marker doesn't seem to have that. In addition, Marker kind of blends well with everyone and just seemingly there, so there's a lack of exclusivity that at least Foldy share, rendering more so just a simple friendship than a passionate bond. But how does the group work as a collective? From what I see, the group doesn't seem to have one ringleader, but if it apparently did, it would most likely be Stapy, and it's not only for the trivial reasons of, well, he's the strongest. Foldy, and to an extent Marker, seems to look up to him quite a bit, as both seemingly had Stapy in mind when joining Free Food, Foldy wanting him to join her, and Marker wanting to follow him. But probably the biggest reason, he seems to be the only one to glue the team together. Once Stapy got eliminated, it seems like Foldy and Marker kind of drifted away further and further and further, and this is when the idea that they were never friends to begin with comes into play. She didn't really say anything when Marker was chucked to hell by Bell in TPOT 1 and just seemingly forgot about him. That is to say the friendship is completely dead. For one, when Foldy got killed by 2 in TPOT 3, Marker seems fairly devastated by the news, showing that he still cares a lot about her. I mean, he wanted to join the same team as her. And this isn't a one-sided thing. Remember how I said seemingly forgot, and not simply forgot? Well, it appears that she never really forgot about Marker, as in TPOT 17 we'll not only see the images of the three, but also a billboard of free food in her room, showing that she does miss the team, and by extension, the trio, and most importantly, Marker too. So why did she sideline him for quite a while? I have a theory that is that Marker and Stapy are great friends, but Marker and Foldy, as I said, are not. This will make the most sense, as I believe that does call out the clash from the social and excited Marker to the shy and socially reserved and honestly awkward Foldy. This should also explain why, following Stacey's elimination, there hasn't been any good interaction between the two, and in a few cases, mainly one-sided on Marco's end. It isn't that Foldy hates Marco or whatever, I think she likes the guy, but doesn't really know what to do with him after Sleepy got eliminated. Well, I guess that's your homework for the video, and don't worry, there's more. Why doesn't Marco and Foldy interact? For now though, the final character I want to talk about is Belle. Although we never see much of each other, which is practically part of the course at this point, we saw them growing closer and closer to each other as BFB went on and went into TPOT. So if we're not really speaking to each other at all, it's making small talk in BFB 15 to Belle suggesting that Foldy should join her in TPOT 1. Bear in mind that Belle is one of the first characters not really associated with Foldy's friends that actually tried to have a friendly, non-competitive discussion with her. So I feel like Foldy might see it as something special, non-romantically speaking. I do have a suggestion that perhaps it's trying to branch out to other characters outside of Stacey, which is why she never really said anything about Belle's turning kerfuffle with Margaret to keep her in her good books. But I think she has absolutely horrendous social skills and cues like mine, because outside of these two episodes, they didn't really speak much. But anyways, Foldy generally gets along well with people, or at least tries to get well with people, but there is one character that would make it go, not cool dude, you're cruising for a bruising, why I order. If you guess that character to be Lie, then congratulations, you get absolutely nothing, and of course it'll be Lie. Now remember guys, like when most things do with Foldy, all together now, there's nothing much to work here. I hate myself. But there is still a very interesting case study between the hatred of the origami and the light switch present. And with Lie, hopefully still being in the game by the time this video goes live, there is a very good possibility for a future exploration between the two enemies, provided that she wins the region, which I will get to later. For now, let's see what we have. Lie is the antithesis to Foldy in almost every way. She's violent, powerful, quite competitive as well, to a violent extent, but at the same time they do have very slim similarities. They both seem to care about their friendships a lot, and it's not always the opposite that is bad. She is far more sociable to others, and is more emotionally intelligent, even to a point where she can make friends with Stacey, someone who used to hate her guts a lot. But I suppose that leaves what Foldy has to do with all this. I think the better question is, what's the scoop with them? And for that, we need to go back. And I mean real back, to the prehistoric times of 2012. A time when the annoying orange was somehow far from the worst thing for kids. Men born in 1974 and teenagers were screaming at each other and all sorts of things on Xbox Live. I was 5 years old, and this video. BFDI episode? I'm just gonna call it episode. It's fun. 225555555. I know might be too much fast. The first known appearance of Lie, Foldy, and Stacey. Well, no, I've been seeing them since the Blair days, but I've always been sent to a therapist on a report sightings of the three to the authorities. Anyway, the video is set to be some sort of fighting match between the three, with Hello Kelvin being the ringleader. Note the cheering when Foldy and Stacey come to the ring, and the booing when Lie shows up, provided they haven't gone deaf yet, because it was like 500 decibels loud. It gives you an inclination that Fly is not very popular. This is rectified further in BFB1, where she talks about her violent past, and of course in TPOT 19, where she killed all the failed debuters, Price Tag, Winner, and a bunch of other people. So this, alongside what we see of Lie, meaning that at BFDR episode 22555, I'm not doing this again, did not end well with Foldy, and I'm going to assume Stacey as well. And therefore, we've had the hatred for the two to Lie, and that gives you a feeling that the hatred the two has for each other comes from a feeling of power. Lie mocks Foldy in BFB2, telling her to go back to Stacey as a jab of how weak she is. And all they can really do is go, ugh. I mean, what can they do, after all, other than smile at Lie after she was eliminated in BFB5? Now again, Lie is back in Teapot, and hopefully she is still in the game, so if there could be some very funky stuff that she and Foldy can do when the others come back, even if she doesn't win a rejoin, perhaps a more detailed perception to why they're enemies, further interaction, and maybe a really cool action scene maybe. I mean, if they could reference Eggy and Teardrop's friendship in Teapot 2, maybe. A brother can only dream after all. So now we've done brushing up Foldy's character, let's go straight forward to BFB 7, where she dies.